Hi, this is Nancy L.T. Hamilton. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be making a hook and eye clasp, and I have an example of how I use them. This is a bracelet that I have made several times, and it has a hook and eye clasp on it. It's simple, easy to use, and anybody can work it with one hand. What the great thing about this is it's very easy to make, and there's only one solder joint for you beginners. So what we need is 12 gauge fine silver, or sterling silver, or copper wire, or even bronze or brass. It doesn't matter, whatever kind, but it needs to be at least 12 gauge for a bracelet clasp. You also need round nose pliers. I like this one because it's a big, meaty round area here, and I use that to make my big loops. This seems to be a little too small to make these loops, so if you can even find a round mandrel that's about this size, that would work too. And then you need a nice pair of round nose pliers that meet nice and tight for making loops. This is for cutting our wire, the cutter, and then regular pliers with the flat edges like this, smooth, no serrated edges in there, and a hammer and a hammering surface. And that's basically it. Oh, can't forget Mr. Ruler. We need to measure. And to be consistent, what I like to do is make a whole bunch at once. So I can use my ruler, but I also can mark it down on my desk surface so that anytime I want to repeat it, I go, okay, 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters, 7 millimeters, it's already down here. For this one, we're going to use 6 millimeters of wire. So I'm just going to jump right into it. This wire is half hard, so it's soft enough for me to work the first time. I'm going to end up annealing it down the road here. Alright, so there's our 6 millimeter mark. And I want to cut with the flush side facing the end of the wire because I want to save myself a step and make sure that this end is nice and flat. I don't want it to be in the shape of a V or an arrow. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Otherwise, if it's the other way, it just ends up looking pretty funky. So now we're going to take this wire and we're going to hammer on both ends, and we're going to spread the wire out into, I guess, what do you call that, a pyramid shape. And about 3 millimeters in, I'm going to start hammering, and I'm going to work my way down to the end. That may be more than 3 millimeters, but I'm guessing here. Okay, and then I turn it over because I'm never consistent on my hammering. I always rotate when I hammer because you can't hit exactly perfectly every time. And this way, by hammering both sides, it allows you to even it out. I don't know why it happens, it just does. I'm going to hammer a little harder down at the end here and a little more because I want to flare it. I want this end to be thin enough to curl it. And the thinner it is, the easier it is for me to manipulate it. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I don't know how many hundreds of these dang things I've made. I use them all the time, and you can put up the metal through the rolling mill with a pattern sheet too and pattern it after you've done the hammering if you want to have a pattern on it. You'd have to anneal it first. But for this one, we're just doing simple and plain. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So at this point, we're going to go in and anneal in a minute. Right now, I'm going to take another step before we walk into the torch room. So the next part of this is we're going to, once again, see, this is that point I was talking about. You don't want to have, it's just kind of messy. So once again, take the flush side of your cutters. Most cutters have a flush side and a non-flush side. I have yet to find one that does both flush. Okay, so, and I'm putting my finger here, by the way, this is a little tip, to keep the wire from flying out. That keeps it from ending up somewhere that away, since I refine all my silver. And that's a great way to keep from losing it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is try to find the mandrel I had. There it is. And you can use a dowel for this. I can tell you what size this is. If I can read this without my optimizer on. It looks like it's 1 centimeter across, approximately. So if you can find a dowel about that size, that would help. And this particular type of dowel has a little slot in it, like the top of a slot head screwdriver. So I have to adjust for it by putting bending the end and putting it in here. Now at this point, I usually put this into a drill and do this, but since not everybody has a drill, I'm going to try to do it by hand. So if I appear clumsy, it's because I am. Okay, wrapping it around. I'm going to do a couple of these. Like I said, I like to make multiples, save myself time. It's like mini factory work, but in the end I really love it because then I don't have to go back, stop what I'm doing, and go make a clasp. I just open up a little box and there's 50 million hooks and eyes. Okay, that's good enough for now. So we have our little loop. I'm going to clip off the funny ends. Once again, flush, side, macho woman. And clip off over here. Okay, so then we need to saw this. So I'm going to get my saw out in a second and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to saw through all these links, and I should have 4 by the time I'm done here. I'm going to saw, I don't want to start over here. Well, I could start over here, but if I saw right in between, it'll make sure that all the ends are going to be beautifully clean and flush. If I start here, I'm not sure if this is perfectly flush. Money down, it isn't. So I'm going to saw in between here, and I'm going to start at an angle. Watch the top end of that saw that you don't saw into your finger. I have done it so many times, and it's not pretty. I keep a whole supply of butterfly bandages here for this particular effort. So I'm going to saw down. This is not the way you would normally use a jeweler saw. In this instance, it's an exception, and just don't tell my professors, okay? You just saw angle like that. Don't be surprised if you break a few blades when you're sawing wire. For some reason, the wire likes to bend and pinch that blade and snap it. So make sure when you buy blades, you always buy at least 12. This one in particular, I believe, is a 3/0. Okay, now I'm starting to bind up. You can tell when it's not easy to move the saw blade anymore, you're bound. So see that? It's stuck on there, and I could snap at this point. What I'm going to do is take the tension off the blade by releasing it and pull it out, and then I'm going to put the tension back in. By the way, stomachs are useful for many things. One of them is to put a saw blade in. My friend Pat, when she was first learning to be a jeweler, told me, she said, I can't believe all the bruises I have on my stomach, and we finally figured out it was from shoving the saw blade into her abdomen. She's strange. Okay, so see how, look how close I came to sawing my finger. So really, you have to be aware of what you're doing. Okay, I'm trying to get a little more up and down motion, which is the actual use of the saw. Always keeping one eye on my finger and that blade and the relationship to them. By the way, there are other ways to cut through these jump rings, and one of them is it's electric, and you use it with your flex shaft, and I use that pretty much all the time, except for when I'm only cutting a few like this. You can find the information for the source for the jump ring cutter, coil cutter I believe it's called, on my website. Okay, so now we have 4 hooks for our hook and eye, 4 eyes for our hook and eye clasp. So I only need 1. So we're going to go into the torch room, and I'll meet you in there in a second, okay?